Imagine a company so powerful it didn't answer to any king, any country, or any law. A company that began by trading spices and ended up owning an entire civilization. In 1600, a handful of merchants signed a single piece of paper in London. That document would become the most profitable business contract in human history, the birth certificate of the East India Company. Within a century, this private corporation commanded its own navy, minted its own coins, and ruled over 200 million people, half a world away. But this isn't just a story about money. It's a story about how greed rewrote history, how one deal sold a nation, and how its echoes still shape the global economy today. The year is 1600. Britain is not yet a superpower. It's a cold island of merchants, explorers, and dreamers, staring jealously at the wealth of Portugal and Spain. Across the seas, ships return from the east, their hulls bursting with spices, silk, and gold. Europe is addicted to Asia's luxuries, and whoever controls that trade controls the world. So, on a winter morning in London, a group of merchants gathers in a candlelit hall. They pool their money, sign a royal charter under Queen Elizabeth I, and give birth to a company that will outlive kingdoms, the Honorable East India Company. Its goal seems simple: to trade peacefully with the East. But behind every polite letter and silk contract hides something far bigger: ambition. The first voyage sails in 1601, led by Captain James Lancaster. Only 4 ships, but they carry more firepower than some navies. When they reach India's shores, they find a land overflowing with riches, textiles finer than anything in Europe, spices worth more than gold, and cities that outshine London. At first, the Mughal emperors see them as harmless traders, another group of foreigners seeking profit. The company bows, pays its taxes, and sets up small trading posts: Calcutta, Madras, Bombay. It smiles, obeys, and waits. But behind those polite smiles, a quiet empire is forming, built not with soldiers, but with silver, persuasion, and patience. Within decades, the East India Company becomes a machine of money. Investors in London grow rich. Stock prices soar. The British Parliament begins to listen. And as its wealth grows, so does its hunger. Because trade was never enough. The company wanted control. Control of the ports. Control of the taxes. Control of India itself. And the first step toward that control would be written in blood on the fields of Bengal. By the mid-1700s, the East India Company was no longer a guest in India. It was a shadow government, trading by day, scheming by night. The Mughal Empire, once the richest power on earth, was crumbling. Regional rulers fought for control, each one desperate for allies and money. That's when the company found its moment. In Bengal, the richest province of all, stood a young Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, proud, impulsive, defiant. And in his court stood a man whose name history would never forget: Jagat Seth, the banker of Bengal. The Seth family controlled the rivers of silver that kept Bengal alive. When kings needed money, they came to him. When armies marched, they marched with his gold. The East India Company knew that whoever controlled Jagat Seth controlled Bengal. So in 1757, secret letters began to flow between Calcutta and Murshidabad. Promises were made, bribes were offered. A fortune that could buy kingdoms changed hands in the dark. Jagat Seth, the most powerful banker in India, agreed to support the company's plan to remove Siraj-ud-Dowlah and replace him with a puppet ruler, Mir Jafar. In exchange, the company promised protection, stability, and unimaginable profit. On June 23, 1757, the deal came due. At a small village called Plassey, British troops under Robert Clive faced the Nawab's massive army, 50,000 men strong. But when the battle began, a strange thing happened. Most of the Nawab's generals refused to fight. They stood still, watching, as the British cannons roared. Within hours, Siraj's army crumbled. Bengal fell. The cost of that betrayal? A few million rupees in gold. The reward, an empire. Jagat Seth had helped the company win Bengal. But what he couldn't see was what came next. The East India Company no longer needed allies. It needed control. Within years, the same system of finance that made the Seth family powerful was turned against them. Taxes rose, wealth drained, and the bankers of Bengal faded into silence. Britain had found the key to ruling India, not by armies, but by debt, trade, and trust. And once they took Bengal, the rest of India was only a matter of time. The year is 1765. The East India Company has done the impossible. A private corporation now controls Bengal, the richest land in Asia. Gold, silk, indigo, salt, opium all flow through its ports. Every ship that leaves India returns to London filled with wealth beyond imagination. In London, stock prices soar. Investors celebrate. The company's officers return from India with fortunes that rival kings. Mansions rise, champagne flows. And in the halls of Parliament, whispers spread. A trading company now runs an empire. But behind the glitter lies something darker. Bengal, once the jewel of the East, begins to starve. The company squeezes the peasants for taxes, demands payment in silver, and exports the very grain that could have fed its people. When the monsoons fail in 1770, the result is catastrophic. Famine sweeps across Bengal. 10 million people die, 1/3 of the province's population. And as bodies line the riverbanks, the company's profits hit record highs. London doesn't care. The ledgers look perfect. To the shareholders, Bengal is just a number. Revenue up, dividends up, humanity erased. The company grows bolder. It mints its own coins, builds its own army of over 260,000 men, more than any European nation except France. Its generals conquer territories from the Ganges to the Himalayas, and its clerks dictate terms to princes who once ruled with divine right. The company is now a government, a bank, and an empire, all in one. But power built on greed cannot last forever. In 1857, after a century of corruption, famine, and exploitation, India erupts in rebellion. Soldiers rise against their British officers. Cities burn. For the first time, the company faces an enemy it cannot bribe. The revolt is crushed, but the message is clear. The company's rule is over. In 1858, the British Crown dissolves the East India Company, taking direct control of India. The flag changes, but the system remains. The company may have died, but its spirit, the pursuit of profit over people, never did. And in many ways, we still live in the world it created. When the East India Company collapsed, the world believed the age of private empires had ended. But history doesn't end, it evolves. The company's power was simple: control trade, control currency, control governments. Today, that power looks different, but it's still here. Corporations worth more than nations. Banks that move trillions with a keystroke. Tech empires that know more about us than our own leaders do. They don't raise armies, they buy them. They don't conquer lands. They conquer data, attention, and debt. And just like the East India Company, they all share one belief: that profit justifies everything. In the 18th century, Bengal's gold funded Britain's empire. In the 20th century, the world's gold funded America's. Every empire begins with ambition and ends when greed outweighs its ideals. So when we look at the world today, at the markets, the monopolies, the rising debts, the real question isn't how the East India Company fell. It's whether we've built another one and just given it a different name.